economy has left us behind.
But when your colleague at the top of the AFL-CIO, John Sweeney, when he rails against what he says is, quote, help for Wall Street when America needs help for Main Street, when he draws that distinction between the two, isn't that an entirely false premise?
No, it isn't.
The fact is, if Wall Street isn't bailed out, and of course now they've voted in the Congress to bail it out, if it's not bailed out, it takes down America's workers with it.
No, there's a balance to be struck. No one says do away with Wall Street. What we've said is rein them in and make sure that Main Street, workers like myself, coming out of a coal mine or a steel mill or a teacher, that we get our fair share of the wealth that we produce. This is the richest nation on the face of the earth at its most rich point in time. And they tell us that, one, we can't have health care, we can't have pensions, we have to continue to give away, while they, the people on Wall Street, pig out and have a party and expect us to pay for the party that we weren't invited to.
But what you are doing is drawing this, again, this clear distinction. A few fat cats and the people who've suffered the consequences. Seems to me, and indeed Barack Obama's talked about this too, that maybe it's time for all Americans, both rich and not so rich, to say, you know what, we've all actually lived too high on the hog. Whether we're rich or poor, we've all indulged in too much debt, whether it's to buy a car or buy a fancy home. And it's a responsibility on all of us.
Well, it's nice to say, after you've had a party for 30 years that I didn't get to come to, and now the payment comes due, that we all ought to share in the payment. Now let me tell you, we've paid for 30 years. One, our wages in this country have been stagnant for 30 years. Their wages have gone up dramatically, dramatically. The people at the top has had their wages increase 564%, while our wages have been stagnant. We've lost health care. More Americans don't have health care. 47 million of us don't have health care. There are more children living in poverty. We pay more for health care in this country, those of us that do have it, than any other place in the world, and we get worse results. We're 31st when it comes to how long we live. We're 34th when it comes to child mortality. We've already paid the price.
So you would accept no responsibility then on ordinary folks to actually rein in their collection of credit cards, their reliance on debt? Don't you think that ordinary folks have to accept some responsibility too?
Here's what happened. It was a strategy that workers have had to go through. We had an economy that, instead of giving us wage increases, and remember this, the U.S. economy is 71% driven by consumer spending. So if consumers don't have money, they can't spend, the economy goes down. Instead of giving us wage increases, they gave us the illusion of wealth by forcing us to borrow, by giving you a house that goes up in price and says, you're now worth $1 million instead of $500,000. It's the same house. So those are all strategies that workers had to go through to try to cope with an economy that's geared for those at the top and not to reward people who work every day for a living.
So are you, as one of the top union bosses in the country, telling me that you don't believe America's capitalist system works?
I don't believe the deregulated system of neoliberalism works.
Do you believe in capitalism?
I do. I do. But I don't believe in, I believe in the Keynesian system. I don't believe in neoliberalism because it doesn't work. That's what we've seen. Neoliberalism says they give too much credence to the market and too little credence to the role of government. And they say, get every regulation out of the way and the market will work wonderfully. We've had 30 years of that in this country.
So you want to go back to an era of
it hasn't worked wonderfully. Wait, no.
Big government, big regulation, massive state intervention. You sound a bit like a union leader from Great Britain in the 1970s.
Well, first of all, you ought not to put words in my mouth, Stephen. You're smarter than that. And I'm not willing to let you speak for me. I'll speak for it. I didn't say massive government. I said proper regulation. That's what I said. They've been unregulated. They need to be regulated because they've proven, Wall Street has proven, that unregulated, they can't be trusted.
Let's talk about what the unions can do in practical terms to make a contribution to the different, nuanced capitalist system that you want to see. Because first off...
Can I go back and just explain that to you? From 1946 to 1973 in this country, productivity doubled. And so did wages in this country. And the interesting thing was that the people in the bottom two quintiles, 0 to 20%, and 20 to 40%, their income was increasing faster than the people at the top. And as a result, the wage gap in this country was shrinking. From 1973 to date, productivity has continued to soar. Wages have stagnated. All the difference in that money has gone to about 3 or 4% at the top of the heap.
But I wanted to ask you in practical terms what you in the union movement can offer to change the situation, because you talk about the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I would hazard a guess that union membership in those days was at least, what, 25% of the workforce?
Yeah.
Now you are down to roughly, what, 12, 13% of the workforce.
We'll represent about 26 or 27% at the polls come election day.
Yeah, but let's get away from voting for a moment and just talk practical realities on the shop floor. You represent about 1 in 8 workers.
But hold a second, wait a second. There's two things you got to talk about. Right? The economy is not like the weather. It's made up of rules. Those rules decide the winners and the losers. Those rules are made by people that we elect. The people that we've elected in the past, we've let them make bad rules. We're not going to do that anymore.
Well, you say that,
we're
but
now educating our members about an economic analysis to show them that the deregulation that they went through, the claims that you like to make about, the exaggerated claims that you tried to put in my mouth about massive government, you have to have regulation, because they've proven they can't exist without regulation.
But hang on, President Bill Clinton oversaw 8 years of economic growth. He also oversaw a period when union membership was in decline. So a Democratic president isn't necessarily going to change the picture for unions in America. My question to you is, when you only represent 1 in 8 American workers, how can you really change capitalism in America today?
We're still the most powerful voice out there. We're still the most powerful group out there for social grassroots. We still speak for a lot of workers that don't have unions. In addition to our actual membership, we started a community group. It's called Working America. In less than 3 years, we now represent 2.5 million people in Working America that are associated with us. And we're organizing them at the rate of 30 to 50,000 every single week, because they want a voice and they want us to speak for them on economic issues.
And is that why you want to do away with secret ballots for unionization of workplaces? Because you believe that if people have to...
Where did you hear that from?
Where did I hear it from? I heard it actually from George McGovern, a long-time, Democrat who has spoken out against the Democratic Party's support for a measure which would do away with the secret ballot in workplaces.
Let's talk to you and George both. I happen to know George McGovern. First of all, it doesn't do away with secret ballots. What it does decide is who gets to decide whether they want a secret ballot. Under today's system, 92% of the times that we try to do an organizing drive, workers are threatened, they're fired, they're intimidated, they're called into one-on-one sweat sections with their bosses.
But in the end, it's a secret ballot.
No,
they cannot be intimidated in a secret ballot because nobody knows how they can be.
And here's how. Here's how they intimidate them. They say, if you vote for a union, I'm closing your plant down. And they do it. They say, I'm going to fire you if you try to form a union. And they do it. 25,000 workers a year get fired. What we're talking about right now is a system that is company dominated and controlled and is unfair. We're trying to get a system where workers have the say of whether they want to join a union or not. 60 million Americans right now say, I would join a union tomorrow if I were given the opportunity. They won't get the opportunity because they are threatened. And let me ask you this stuff. If I were your boss and I got to decide whether you got a job or not tomorrow, and I say to you, who are you voting for? You voting for Barack Obama or you voting for John McCain? And you know I'm supporting John McCain. What are you going to say to me? And if you know I can fire you, and you're on a one-on-one session like this, you think that's a fair system? When you got 3 bosses sitting around interrogating a worker, that's the system we have today. And George has never been through that.
All right, well, let's leave aside the issue of the secret ballot and its merits. Let's talk about the reality. In these very difficult economic times.
You want to concede you lost that one?
No, I don't want to concede that at all. Okay. I want the public to decide who won and who lost. Okay. Secret ballots are a feature of democracies around the world.
And they can still have it. But under this system, the worker decides whether they want it or not instead of the boss.